The boxing coach looked at Chuck Norris and Jason Statham standing in his gym. He laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "You too?" "In my ring. This isn't Hollywood, grandpas, this is real fighting." The entire gym went silent. Trainees stopped hitting bags. Sparring partners froze mid-punch. Everyone knew who these two men were. But the coach, he didn't care. His ego was bigger than his common sense. "I've trained champions. Real fighters. Not actors who need stunt doubles to throw a fake punch." Chuck Norris stood there, calm as still water, no reaction. No anger, just patience. Jason Statham's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. His eyes did all the talking. The coach stepped closer, gold chain swinging, pointing his finger inches from Chuck's chest. "You want to train here? Fine. But first you prove you belong. 3 rounds. You and your buddy against me." He smirked, cracking his knuckles. "And let's make it interesting. When I beat you both, you pay me 50 grand, each." The room erupted in whispers. Is he serious? Is challenging them? This guy has no idea what he just did. Chuck glanced at Jason. Jason nodded back. "All right, coach," Chuck said quietly. "We accept." The coach grinned like a wolf. "Good. Get your gloves. This is going to be fun." But what happened in that ring wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson in humility that no one in that gym would ever forget. And the twist at the end. It changed everything. It was a cold Saturday morning at Iron Fist Boxing Academy in downtown Los Angeles. The gym sat on a corner street, wedged between a tattoo parlor and an old diner that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. From the outside, it didn't look like much. Peeling paint, faded sign, cracked sidewalk, but inside, it was a different world. Heavy bags hung from steel chains. Speed bags rattled like machine guns. The floor was stained with years of sweat, blood, and ambition, and ruling over it all was Coach Brantley, the beast. Monroe, he wasn't just the owner. He was the king. Trophies lined the walls, dozens of them, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Photos covered every corner. Brantley in his prime, fists raised, standing over knocked-out opponents. 1987 regional champion, 1991 state Golden Gloves winner, undefeated in 24 amateur bouts. He made sure every new member saw them, every visitor, every delivery guy who walked through that door. "See that?" he'd say, pointing at the biggest photo. "That's what a real fighter looks like." Brantley was in his late 50s now, but he still moved like he owned the ring. Broad shoulders, thick arms, a belly that had softened over the years, but hands that still looked like hammers. He strutted through the gym every morning, barking orders, adjusting someone's stance with a shove, correcting footwork with a slap to the back of the head. "You call that a jab?" "My grandma hits harder than you." "Move your feet. You're not planted in cement." "If you can't take my words, you sure as hell can't take a punch." "Get out if you're soft." His assistant coaches, 2 younger guys named Marco and Dev, stayed quiet. They'd learned a long time ago not to question him. They'd seen too many good people leave because of Brantley's cruelty. Talented fighters who couldn't handle the constant humiliation. Kids with potential who quit because the coach crushed their confidence before they could build their skills, but Brantley didn't care. To him, respect was earned through fear. Loyalty was built through dominance. "This is a warrior's gym," he'd say, "not a daycare." He walked around like a king surveying his kingdom, gold chain bouncing on his chest, designer sneakers squeaking on the mat, a toothpick dangling from the corner of his mouth. On this particular Saturday morning, the gym was packed. Trainees were scattered across the space, some jumping rope, some shadowboxing, others grappling in the corner ring. Brantley stood near the center, arms crossed, watching everything with sharp, judgmental eyes. Then the door opened. A gust of cold air swept in. 2 men walked through. No entourage, no cameras, no announcement. Just 2 men in simple workout clothes. Chuck Norris wore a plain black shirt, gray sweatpants, and old running shoes. His hair was neat, his face calm, his posture relaxed. Jason Statham walked beside him in a dark hoodie and jeans, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. They didn't look like celebrities. They looked like regular guys coming in for a workout. The receptionist at the front desk, a young woman named Carla, looked up from her phone. Her eyes widened. She recognized them immediately, but she stayed professional, cool, respectful. "Good morning." Chuck smiled warmly. "Would like to join a class?" "Just here to train," Jason added. "Nothing fancy. Just looking for a good gym." Carla nodded, trying not to stare. "Of course. Let me get Coach Brantley for you." She stood up, walked toward the center of the gym, and tapped Brantley on the shoulder. "Coach, There are 2 men at the front desk who want to join. Brantley didn't even turn around, so sign them up. That's your job. I think you should meet them. He sighed, annoyed, and finally turned. Fine. But this better be worth my time. He walked toward the front desk, chewing gum, adjusting his gold chain, rolling his shoulders like he was warming up for a fight. When he saw Chuck and Jason standing there, he stopped, looked them up and down, and smirked. Well, look who we got here. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe real strength is silent, type MEMB below. Let's see how many wise people are here today. Brantley walked closer, chewing his gum louder now, making a show of it. He stopped about 3 feet away from Chuck and Jason, hands on his hips, gold chain catching the light. His eyes moved from Chuck's face to Jason's, then back again. A slow, condescending smile spread across his face. Well, look who decided to grace my gym with their presence. A couple of movie stars. Chuck stayed calm, his expression neutral. He nodded politely. Good morning, coach. We're just here to train. Jason said nothing. He simply stood there, hands still in his pockets, watching. Brantley chuckled, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Train, here.
Nah, man.
This gym is for real fighters, not stuntmen who get their punches edited in post-production. A few trainees nearby stopped what they were doing. They glanced over, uncomfortable. Someone whispered, "Is he serious right now?" Another muttered, "Does he not know who they are?" Brantley didn't care. He was on a roll now, feeding off his own ego. He turned to Marco and Dev, his assistant coaches, who stood a few feet away. You guys hear this? Hollywood came to train at Iron Fist. Marco shifted uncomfortably. Coach, maybe we should what? Brantley snapped. Roll out the red carpet. Give them autograph books. He turned back to Chuck and Jason, stepping even closer now. Look, I've trained men who've won national titles. State champions. Guys who fought in the real world, not in front of green screens with CGI blood. Chuck's expression didn't change, but his eyes, steady, sharp, calm, said everything. Jason's jaw tightened just slightly. His hands came out of his pockets. Not aggressive. Just ready. Brantley pointed at the ring in the center of the gym. You see that? That's where warriors are made. Not actors. Not celebrities. Warriors. He puffed out his chest, talking louder now, making sure everyone in the gym could hear him. I don't have time to babysit actors playing tough guys. This isn't a movie set. You can't yell cut when it gets hard. The gym had gone completely silent now. Every trainee was watching, every coach. Even the guys lifting weights in the back had stopped mid-rep. Chuck took a slow breath, then spoke, his voice low, calm, and respectful. We respect your gym, coach. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to learn. Brantley laughed again, louder this time. From me. Oh, that's rich. He turned to the crowd, arms spread wide like a showman. You hear that, everybody? Chuck Norris wants to learn from me. A few nervous chuckles echoed through the gym. Most people stayed silent, too uncomfortable to react. Jason finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. We came here in good faith, coach. If you don't want us here, just say so. We'll leave. Brantley's grin faded slightly. His eyes narrowed. Oh, you'll leave, all right. But not before I make sure you understand something. He stepped even closer now, invading their space, his breath reeking of coffee and arrogance. In the real world, you don't get to fake it. You don't get a director to make you look good. You don't get a second take. Chuck didn't move. Didn't blink. Just waited. Brantley pointed at his chest. I've been in real fights. I've trained real champions. I don't need Hollywood telling me what toughness looks like. Jason's eyes stayed locked on Brantley's face. Cold, calculating, waiting. Then Brantley said the words that would change everything. Tell you what. You want in my ring? Prove you're not faking it. He cracked his knuckles, smirking. Spar with me? 3 rounds. You last all 3, you can stay. You quit, and I know you will. You leave and never come back. The room went completely still. One of the assistant coaches, Dev, whispered urgently, Coach, that's Chuck Norris and Jason Statham. Brantley spun around, eyes blazing. I don't care if it's Superman and Batman. In my gym, you earn your spot. He turned back to Chuck and Jason, breathing heavy now, adrenaline pumping. So what's it going to be, Hollywood? You going to talk, or you going to prove it? Chuck looked at Jason. Jason looked back. No words were exchanged, just a silent understanding between 2 men who had been underestimated their entire lives. Chuck turned back to Brantley, his voice calm as stone. All right, coach, let's do it. The gym erupted in whispers. Phones came out. People started recording, and Brantley, he grinned like he'd already won. He had no idea what he'd just started. Brantley stood there, grinning like a man who'd just won the lottery. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck side to side, and bounced on his toes like he was already warming up for the fight. All right then. Let's make this official. He walked over to the ring, climbed through the ropes, and stood in the center like a gladiator entering the arena. The entire gym gathered around. Trainees abandoned their bags and ropes. Coaches stopped their sessions. Even people from the locker room came out to see what was happening. Everyone had their phones out now. Cameras pointed at the ring. Brantley raised his voice, addressing the crowd like a ringmaster. Ladies and gentlemen, today you're about to witness something special. He pointed at Chuck and Jason, who stood calmly outside the ring. These two Hollywood tough guys think they can hang in a real gym. So we're going to put that to the test. The crowd murmured. Some people looked excited, others looked nervous. Carla, the receptionist, whispered to Marco, "This is a bad idea." Marco nodded. "I know. But try telling him that." Brantley continued, louder now, feeding off the attention. 3 rounds! Me versus both of them. If they last all 3 rounds without quitting, they can train here anytime they want. He paused, letting the moment build. But, his grin widened, if I beat them, and trust me, I will, they pay me $50,000. Each. The gym exploded in shocked whispers. 50 grand. Is he out of his mind? That's 100,000 total. Chuck remained perfectly still, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. Jason tilted his head slightly, studying Brantley like a scientist observing an experiment. Brantley pointed at them again. What's the matter? 50 grand too much for a couple of big-time movie stars. Chuck took a slow step forward. And if we last all 3 rounds? He asked calmly. Brantley laughed, throwing his head back. You won't. But hypothetically, if you somehow manage to survive, he spread his arms wide, gesturing to the entire gym. I'll shut this place down and hand you the keys. Iron Fist Boxing Academy becomes yours. The crowd gasped. Dev's eyes went wide. Coach, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Brantley snapped. Because it's not going to happen. These two will quit before the second round even starts. He looked directly at Chuck and Jason, his voice dripping with arrogance. You're actors. You're used to comfort, air-conditioned trailers, makeup artists, personal assistants bringing you water. He tapped his chest hard. I'm a fighter. I've been hit by men twice your size. I've broken ribs, noses, jaws. I've made grown men cry. Jason finally spoke, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. We don't want your gym, coach. Brantley blinked, surprised. What? Chuck stepped forward, standing beside Jason. We're not here to take anything from you. We're here to train to learn. To stay humble, Jason added. But we accept your challenge. His eyes locked onto Brantley's. Not for money. Not for your gym. For respect. Brantley scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Respect. You can't buy respect in a ring. You earn it by surviving. Chuck's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Exactly. And maybe today, you'll learn what that really means. The crowd went silent. Brantley's grin faltered for just a second. Just a flicker of doubt, but his ego pushed it away. All right then. Let's stop talking and start fighting. He clapped his hands together, loud and sharp. Marco! Dev! Get them gloves. Headgear too. Since I don't want a lawsuit when I knock them out. Marco hesitated, then grabbed 2 pairs of gloves from the equipment rack. Dev brought over headgear, handing it to Chuck and Jason quietly. Good luck, Dev whispered. And, thank you for doing this. Jason looked at him, confused. Dev glanced toward Brantley, then back at Jason. Someone needs to teach him a lesson. Maybe it's you too. Jason gave a small nod. We'll see. Chuck pulled on his gloves, testing the fit. Jason did the same. They climbed into the ring, moving with the calm confidence of men who had nothing to prove. Brantley stood across from them, shadowboxing, throwing quick jabs into the air, showing off. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording, voices buzzing with anticipation. Carla stood near the front, arms crossed, shaking her head. This is either going to be the best thing that ever happened to this gym, she muttered, or the worst mistake Brantley's ever made. A trainee next to her whispered, my money's on the second one. The bell sat on a stool outside the ring. Marco picked up the hammer. He looked at Chuck, then at Jason, then at Brantley. Ready? Brantley cracked his knuckles one last time. Let's go. Marco raised the hammer and rang the bell. Pause the video right here and comment. Should Chuck and Jason go easy on him or teach him a lesson? Type Mershwai or lesson. I'm reading every single comment. The bell rang, sharp, clear. Final. Brantley came out fast, too fast. He bounced on his toes, threw a few quick jabs into the air, rolling his shoulders, hyping himself up. Come on, Hollywood.
Let's see what you got.
Chuck stood in the center of the ring, hands up but relaxed, feet planted, watching. Jason circled slowly to the side, quiet, calculating, his eyes never leaving Brantley. Brantley lunged forward, throwing a wild right hook aimed at Chuck's head. Chuck moved his head exactly 2 inches to the left. The punch whistled past his ear, hitting nothing but air. Brantley stumbled slightly, caught off balance. The crowd murmured. He recovered quickly, throwing another jab. Faster this time, sharper. Chuck slipped it again. Effortless, like he knew it was coming before Brantley even threw it. Stand still, old man. Brantley barked, frustration creeping into his voice. Chuck said nothing, just watched. Calm as a lake before a storm, Brantley turned his attention to Jason. All right, tough guy. Your turn. He charged Jason with a flurry of punches, left, right, throwing everything he had. Jason moved like water. He slipped the first punch, ducked under the second, leaned back from the third, sidestepped the fourth. Every movement was smooth, controlled, minimal. Not a single punch landed. Brantley was already breathing hard. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His gold chain bounced wildly against his chest. The crowd was getting louder now. Wet. Are they even trying? No, they're playing with him. He hasn't landed a single hit. Brantley's face turned red. His jaw clenched. His ego was cracking. He spun back toward Chuck, eyes blazing with anger. Stop dancing and fight. He threw a massive haymaker, a punch designed to end the fight in one shot. Chuck saw it coming from a mile away. He sidestepped smoothly, letting Brantley's momentum carry him forward. And as Brantley stumbled past, Chuck reached out and tapped him lightly on the shoulder. Not a punch, a message. You're too angry to fight smart. The crowd gasped. Brantley froze, his back to Chuck, breathing hard, fists trembling. That tap, that simple light tap, hurt worse than any punch could have. It was humiliation. Pure and quiet. He spun around, rage flooding his face.
You think this is funny?
Chuck's expression didn't change, calm, patient, almost sad. No, coach. I think you're fighting yourself, not us. Brantley roared and charged again, throwing wild punches with no technique, no control. Jason stepped in this time. He slipped under a right hook, spun to Brantley's side, and stopped. Just stood there, close enough to strike, but he didn't. Brantley swung again. Jason ducked. The punch sailed over his head. Another swing, another miss. Brantley was punching air. The gym was completely silent, now except for the sound of Brantley's heavy breathing and the squeak of his shoes on the mat. His punches were getting slower. Sloppier, his arms felt like lead. He swung one more time, a desperate, exhausted jab. Chuck caught his wrist midair, held it gently, looked Brantley in the eyes. You're tired because you're wasting energy. Breathe, reset. Then Chuck let go. Brantley staggered backward, chest heaving, legs shaking. The bell rang, round one over. He stumbled back to his corner and collapsed onto the stool. Marco rushed over with a water bottle. Dev grabbed a towel. Coach, you need to stop this, Marco said quietly. They're not even trying and you can barely stand. Shut up, Brantley gasped, gulping water. I'm fine, they just got lucky. Dev leaned in, his voice low and urgent. Coach, that wasn't luck. They could have knocked you out 5 times already. They're holding back. Brantley's hands were shaking as he gripped the water bottle. Deep down, he knew. He knew Dev was right, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. He looked across the ring. Chuck and Jason stood calmly in their corner. Not even breathing hard, not even sweating. They weren't tired. They were waiting. Brantley's stomach twisted. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a ring. Fear. The bell rang again. Round 2. The bell rang. Brantley stood up slowly, legs heavy, arms aching. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. This time he didn't charge. He didn't showboat. He moved cautiously. Calculated. He'd learned his lesson, sort of. Chuck and Jason met him in the center of the ring. Brantley threw a careful jab. Clean, controlled. Jason slipped it, but nodded slightly. Better. Brantley threw another. A straight right this time. Chuck moved his head just enough to avoid it. But then something changed. Jason stepped forward and threw a jab of his own. Not hard, not meant to hurt, but fast. Precise, it grazed Brantley's cheek, barely touching, but close enough to send a message. Brantley's eyes widened. The crowd gasped. Did you see that? That was a warning shot. Chuck followed up with a lightning-fast combination. 3 strikes in less than a second. None of them landed. But all of them came within an inch of Brantley's face. Close enough for him to feel the wind from each punch. Close enough to know, if they wanted to, they could end this right now. Brantley stumbled backward, panic flashing across his face. His breathing quickened. His hands dropped slightly. Jason spoke quietly, but his voice cut through the noise. You're not listening to your body. You're fighting with your pride. Brantley blinked, sweat dripping into his eyes. What? Your footwork is off. Chuck added calmly. Your shoulders are tight. You're holding your breath. Brantley looked down at his own feet, confused. They were right. He was holding his breath. His shoulders were tight. He'd been so focused on winning, on proving himself, that he'd forgotten everything he used to teach his own fighters. He threw another punch weak, desperate. Chuck ducked under it effortlessly, spun behind him, and tapped the back of his head soft, controlled, humiliating. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. I could have knocked him out right there. They're teaching him, not beating him. Brantley's legs buckled. His chest heaved. He wasn't just losing the fight. He was losing himself. Jason stepped closer, his voice firm but not cruel. This isn't about strength, coach. It's about control, discipline. Respect. Brantley swung again. Wild, angry, tears forming in his eyes. Chuck caught his wrist. Gently, stop fighting us. Start listening. Brantley's arm went limp in Chuck's grip. His whole body sagged. The bell rang, round 2 over. He collapsed into his corner, gasping for air, his face buried in his hands. Marco and Dev rushed over, but they didn't know what to say. They'd never seen their coach like this. Broken, humbled. Human. Across the ring, Chuck and Jason stood quietly. Still calm, still patient. Waiting for round 3. The final round. The one that would change everything. The bell rang for the final round. Brantley could barely stand. His legs trembled as he pushed himself off the stool. Marco grabbed his arm. Coach, please. This is enough. You've got nothing left to prove. Brantley pulled away weakly. I'm not a quitter. He stumbled forward into the ring, fists up but shaking, eyes glazed with exhaustion and something else. Shame. Chuck and Jason met him in the center one last time. Brantley threw a weak jab. Barely any power behind it. Chuck blocked it gently with his glove, like catching a falling leaf. Coach, Chuck said quietly. Why are you still fighting? Brantley's voice cracked. Because I'm not a quitter. Jason stepped closer, his tone softer now. There's a difference between quitting and knowing when to stop. One is wisdom. The other is just ego. Brantley's eyes filled with tears. Not from pain, from truth. He swung again, desperate, wild, like a drowning man reaching for air. Jason sidestepped it easily. Brantley lost his balance and nearly fell. Chuck caught him by the arm, steadying him. It's okay, Chuck said. You don't have to keep going. But Brantley pulled away, staggering backward, breathing in ragged gasps. No, I have to. I have to finish. He threw one last punch, weak, slow. Heartbroken, Chuck caught his hand mid-air, held it there, looked directly into Brantley's eyes. You're a good coach, Brantley. But you've forgotten what this is really about. Brantley's lip trembled. Tears streamed down his face. It's not about proving you're the toughest. Chuck continued, his voice calm and kind. It's about building others up, making them stronger, not tearing them down to feel powerful. Chuck gently lowered Brantley's hand, and then let go. Brantley stood there for a moment swaying. Then his knees gave out. He dropped to the mat, not from a punch, from the weight of the truth. He buried his face in his gloves and sobbed. The entire gym was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Just the sound of a broken man crying in the center of the ring. Jason walked over slowly, knelt beside him, extended his hand. Brantley looked up through tear-filled eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Jason's expression softened. You don't owe us an apology. Chuck knelt on the other side. You owe it to every person you've broken down in this gym. Every fighter you humiliated. Every student you made feel small. Brantley nodded, his whole body shaking. I know I've been terrible. I thought that's what a coach was supposed to be. Tough. Unbreakable. Chuck put a hand on his shoulder. A coach is supposed to be strong, yes. But strength isn't cruelty, it's lifting others when they fall. Jason stood and offered his hand again. This time Brantley took it. Jason pulled him to his feet. Brantley stood there, face red, tears still streaming, looking at the two men who had just given him the hardest lesson of his life. Thank you, he whispered. The crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. Then the entire gym erupted in applause, not for the fight, for the lesson, for the moment a man chose to change. Brantley looked around overwhelmed, and for the first time in years, he smiled, not with arrogance, with gratitude. Chuck and Jason stepped out of the ring quietly. They removed their gloves, handing them to Marco, who stood there speechless. Brantley leaned against the ropes, still catching his breath, wiping his face with a towel. The crowd had gone quiet again, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Chuck turned back toward the ring. "Coach." Brantley looked up, eyes red and swollen. "We're not taking your gym." Brantley blinked confused. "What?" Jason stepped forward. "And we're not taking your money either." Brantley's mouth opened, but no words came out. Chuck continued, his voice calm and genuine. "This is your gym. These are your fighters. You built this place, and you can still make it something great." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But only if you remember why you started in the first place." Brantley stared at them, still trying to process what he was hearing. You're letting me keep it." Jason nodded. "Everyone deserves a second chance, especially someone willing to learn." Chuck smiled slightly. "And besides, we'll be back next week to train as students." Brantley's eyes went wide.
"You'd come back? After everything I said? After how I treated you?"
Yes.
Chuck said simply. "Because that's what humility looks like. We didn't come here to embarrass you. We came here to train, and that's still what we want." Jason added, "And maybe you can teach us something too. Real coaching, real discipline, not ego, just truth." Brantley's throat tightened. Fresh tears welled up in his eyes. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," Jason said honestly, "but you will. If you change." Brantley nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will, I promise. I'll be better." Chuck extended his hand. Brantley hesitated, then reached out and shook it firmly. Jason did the same. The three men stood there for a moment. No cameras, no showboating, just mutual respect. Then Chuck and Jason turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted, watching them go in stunned silence. But before they reached the door, Brantley called out. "Wait." They stopped and turned. Brantley stepped forward, his voice stronger now. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Chuck smiled. "We didn't do anything, Coach. You did. You chose to listen." And with that, they walked out into the cold morning air. The door closed behind them. For a moment, no one in the gym moved. Then, slowly, the trainees began to clap again. This time it wasn't for the fight. It was for the change. Brantley stood in the center of the gym, looking around at the faces of his fighters, people he'd yelled at, belittled, pushed too hard. He took a deep breath. "Everyone," he said, his voice shaking, "I owe you all an apology." And for the first time in years, the gym felt like home. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can control when you have the power to destroy. Chuck Norris and Jason Statham walked into that gym as visitors. They could have walked out as conquerors. They could have humiliated Coach Brantley in front of everyone. They could have taken his gym, his pride, his reputation. But they didn't, because real warriors don't break people. They build them. Humility isn't weakness. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. It's knowing you're strong enough to win, but wise enough to show mercy. Chuck and Jason didn't just teach Brantley how to fight better. They taught him how to be better. And that's a lesson worth more than any trophy on a wall. See, the world is full of people like Coach Brantley. People who confuse loudness with strength. Who think respect is something you demand, not something you earn. Who believe that putting others down somehow lifts them up. But the truth is simple. Power without humility is just cruelty. Strength without kindness is just violence. And ego without wisdom is just loneliness. Chuck Norris and Jason Statham didn't need to raise their voices. They didn't need to throw a single real punch. They just showed up, stayed calm, and reminded everyone watching what real strength looks like. It's the father who doesn't yell, even when he's frustrated. It's the teacher who lifts a struggling student instead of embarrassing them. It's the boss who listens instead of commands. It's the friend who forgives instead of holding a grudge. Real power is silent. Real respect is earned. And real change begins the moment someone chooses to stop pretending they're perfect and starts admitting they can grow. Coach Brantley learned that the hard way, but he learned. And because Chuck and Jason chose mercy over victory, that gym became a better place, not just for Brantley, for everyone. If this story moved you, type Respect in the comments and tell me, where are you watching from? I want to personally thank every kind soul here.